This is the intelligence, that this is the whole UFO experience. It's got nothing to do with aliens getting lost in space or exploring us or checking our DNA or anything. They're trying to get a message across. It started after we detonated the atomic bomb. And the way they're doing it, I call it the theory of wow. Now I sort of changed it to call it Jesus circus. But what they're doing is the same thing as Jesus. They walk on water, they feed 5,000 people, they raise Lazarus from the dead. They do all this miracle stuff where everybody's going like, what the heck? And just people are just floored, and then they deliver the message. The message, I believe, is the Ronald Reagan message. How I talked to Gorbachev. He said it at the Maryland High School. I talked to Gorbachev, and I said to him how I wondered how the world would unite as one if faced with a threat from an alien race. And he said, we'd all realize we're all just this human beings, and we're all just God's children.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Grant Cameron. Grant, good to see you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
All right. What the heck is going on with all? I mean, it's still happening. It's not as prominent in the news right now, but there's still reports of objects in the sky. Let's not call them drones. Drones, to me, is kind of the new weather balloon, right?
Yeah.
What's your take? Yeah, what's your take on what's going on?
My take, if I were to put all my money on one roll of the roulette wheel, would be this is the intelligence, that this is the whole UFO experience. It's got nothing to do with aliens getting lost in space or exploring us or checking our DNA or anything. They're trying to get a message across. It started after we detonated the atomic bomb. And the way they're doing it, I call it the theory of wow. Now I sort of changed it to call it Jesus circus. But what they're doing is the same thing as Jesus. They walk on water, they feed 5,000 people, they raise Lazarus from the dead. They do all this miracle stuff where everybody's going like, what the heck? And just people are just floored, and then they deliver the message. The message, I believe, is the Ronald Reagan message. How I talked to Gorbachev. He said it at the Maryland High School. I talked to Gorbachev, and I said to him how I wondered how the world would unite as one if faced with a threat from an alien race. And he said, we'd all realize we're all just this human beings, and we're all just God's children. And this is this idea that we're all just one thing, and we see separation between us, and we fight because of separation and stuff like that. So the way I look at the UFO phenomena is, and when the theory of wow idea is, before they deliver the message, they got to get your attention. So the grade 1 class on some foreign planet or wherever they're from or whoever they are, I'm not too sure they're extraterrestrials or whatever they are. Anyway, they say, okay, how are we going to get the attention? This planet is at this critical period. They're doing nuclear weapons and all this kind of stuff. What are we going to do? And they say, hey, why don't we get some crafts with lights on them and fly the crafts around so they can wonder what's going on? And the whole idea is to make them realize that there's more to the world than what we think, that it's just we're biological robots in a random, meaningless universe. And it's the whole idea. Why do UFOs have lights on them? We don't have lights on our plane. Why do they have lights? Because they want you to see them. They're not doing anything. They just sort of appear and then they disappear and they do weird things and stuff like that. And then the grade 2 class says, well, let's do crop circles. And let's make these weird crop circles. And nobody's going to figure it out. And all the UFO phenomena, it's the same thing. None of it is figured out. We haven't figured out a damn thing about anything. It's always like we can't even get to first base on any of this stuff. So you do the crop circles, and then people realize that we got these radioactivity things. So then somebody says, well, let's do cattle mutilations, downwind and downstream from all nuclear power activities. So they start the cattle mutilations on the Western Plains where they detonated all the atomic bombs and stuff like that. And
by the way, did you see there was a herd of about, I think 162 or 160 cattle that went missing in Colorado in this whole recent thing?
Oh, is that right? Yeah, that's how it started with me. And even the people that were working on like the top cattle mutilation people I was working with didn't realize that when mine started in Manitoba, one of the stories that I never ever talked about because it was so weird, it was just like you sort of discount, was that the one farmer who had majority rancher had most of the stuff over his house, and that nobody in town would talk to this guy. They're called the Lehmans. And then Mrs. Lehman told me she'd go into the post office and people would just see her and just turn around and go out the other door. And they were so ostracized. And they had lost 32 horses. They had PMU horses for birth control pills and stuff. They had these horses, and they'd all gone missing. And I talked to the kid, this is years later, I went back there, and the kid was 1 year old at the time. And I went there and I was taking pictures of the farm, and he came out. He was all angry, like, "What are you doing around my farm?" Whatever. And I said, "Well, I talked to your parents and stuff, and the UFOs and stuff." And he said, "Oh, it haunted me my whole life." He was 1 year old when it happened. And they used to say to him when he went to school, "So what happened to your horses? Did they go to the Milky Way for a drink?" And so they'd lost 32 horses. And he said they were stealing power off his line and stuff like that.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
And that's the whole thing. They're doing this really, really bizarre stuff. Like I said to Linda Howe, I said, "You know why they do this really weird cuts and why they take out every last drop of blood?" And she says, "No, why?" I said, "Because you wouldn't study it unless it was really weird." So they take a heart out of the cow without any incision. You wonder how the hell to get the heart out of the cow. Why do they take every last drop of blood out of the cow? And why do they do this really horrific stuff that people are just horrified when they see when they cut all the cuts and stuff like that? Because they want Linda Howe. They want you. They want everybody to go and take photographs. They want the photographs going everywhere. So people go, "What is going on here? This is just this mystery." And all the things are mysteries. Like they did the ground traces. The big thing for Stanton Friedman used to say, "Oh, we got physical evidence. We got lots of 4,000 ground traces." And I say, most people don't realize. I talked to Ted Phillips, who was the expert on ground traces. 2001, I stuck out the letter. I said, "Hey, Ted, am I missing something or have the ground traces stopped?" He said, "Yeah, they basically stopped. We haven't got one this year yet." And that's the whole thing. So they do the ground traces for 40 years and then they stop. There's been a ground trace for 30 years. And then they go over top of the nuclear missile silos and they do all this stuff and they're trying to get the attention. So what I see in what they're doing now is the story almost like came out of Canada in the 1950s. Wilbur Smith got the message from this AFA alien. He said, "We're going to have an overflight of Washington. There's going to be 500, they called them bells, like the Dembski bells. There's going to be 500 bells are going to come over Washington, and you're all going to realize that this is for real, that there are extraterrestrials, that we're here." And that's what they're doing. They're doing this display. And even the one in New Jersey is actually funny because that's where the War of the Worlds took place. It goes back to the War of the Worlds, and you start to see how they've got.
And it's not just only New Jersey. It's
but the New Jersey one is funny because then you see that that this thing may be all planned. For example, most people don't know the War of the Worlds. One of the people that was involved in the War of the Worlds was Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins was in his house when the War of the Worlds was on the radio and his father was freaking out and the neighbor came in with the gun and he said, we're going to go up on the hill. We're going to defend the city and we're going to shoot these Martians when they come in and stuff like that. And Bud was in the bedroom and he's looking out the window to see if the aliens are coming. And so, of course, his mindset, his whole life was this alien invasion thing. And then when you see how Bud got dragged in is 1964, you can see that like they've got this all planned out. So they got Bud 1964 with the War of the Worlds. Then in 1962, he's 63. He's driving with some people from England in his car, and suddenly this UFO appears over top of the car in plain daylight. It's just hovering above the car.
Wasn't the War of the Worlds in the 30s?
39.
Okay, all right, but then fast forward to 1963, 64.
Yeah, and Bud is now on the coast, East Coast, and he's driving some people, and this thing appears over him, and they're all just floored. They're just looking at this thing. And again, what's the UFO doing? It's not doing anything. It's just hovering above the car. It's just sitting there. And it's like, hey, Bud, can you see us? Can you see us really good? Or can we go in the middle over? And then waving or whatever. And so Bud is obsessed with this. And when the people leave, then he goes the next day and he drives the same distance. And he's trying to figure out how long did it take place? How high was the thing? And his mind is in there. And then they get him with the ultimate thing in 1975. And that's when I started. So 1975, I got involved in May. Linda Howe got involved because of the Malmstrom engagement. Her brother was a helicopter pilot at Malmstrom, and he phoned her up and he said, Linda, there's UFOs over the missile silos. She had never done UFOs, crop circles, calculation. She had done nothing. She went, what? There's UFOs. And that's how it dragged her in. They dragged Bud Hopkins. The reason that how they drug Bud Hopkins in is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you remember in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, this guy's driving along and his car's behind him and he's going, come on, go around me. And all of a sudden the lights start to go up and over top of the car. That is what happened. This guy that sold bud, who ran the corner liquor store, was driving home late at night from work, and this car's being behind me. He's trying to get past me, and the thing goes up over top of the car, and it goes over this park in New Jersey, and the thing lands, and these 10 aliens come walking out like so, and they're all dressed the same, like little soldiers, and they all got a bag with a shovel, and they put a scoop of stuff in the bag, and they all go back onto the ship, and the ship flies away, and Bud goes, they did what? He's like, you're kidding me. And he goes to the park and he finds the 10 holes and he's down the rabbit hole. And that's when Bud gets into abductions.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
So you can see them. And Travis Walton was abducted that year. That was the year Stephen Greer did his first C5. And you start to go like, man, they got this thing all planned out. It's like they're dragging people into almost like a stage play. If you get the idea of reincarnation, that we all come in with a mission and we have this thing. And so you come into the play now and okay, now you come in and everybody's playing their little role in the stage play. So I always look at it as a theory. Wow. So they're doing this thing where they're doing more and more and more UFOs. And it's an American phenomenon because that's where the major news media is. And they know it's controlling the sort of the UFO narrative. Nothing comes out of Canada. No, there's no researchers. There's nothing here and stuff like that. And they know. So I think what you're going to see is more and more and more and more of these things that are undeniable, where people are talking about them, and that raises the consciousness. And then eventually the government is going to make some admission. Yeah, okay, we know this kind of stuff's going on. But it's the phenomena is doing the Jesus circus. It's just more and more dramatic events that they're getting bigger. There's going to be more orbs. They're going to be over different things. But it's all the military, which indicates to me that they're sending a message to the U.S. military. They're pissed off at them, or they know that they're going to get the message out or whatever it is, because it's not happening over anything else. It's these very highly sensitive sites. And as I mentioned before, there's a 1949 map that shows exactly the same thing, that they were doing this back in the 1940s.
Well, it's also timing too, right? I think when they had the big 1952 flap, we were doing lots of nuclear testing. The hydrogen bomb was I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if it's tested in 52 or 54, but like that was coming out. And particularly right now, we had just moved the B-61-12 nuclear gravity bombs to Lakenheath. And that's where they first started appearing over, I think, Milden House, Lakenheath, and Feltwell. Yeah. I just love these British names of UK Air Force bases. I did a
paper on that as well, the connection between major UFO events. Like 75, I was trying to figure out, like 75, I had all the overflights of the SAC bases on the northern Canadian border. And that was exactly when Travis Walton was abducted. And most people don't know that when Travis Walton was abducted, the 6th to the 10th of November, every single night there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo or a nuclear missile storage area over the United States. That's when that all happened, that SAC thing where they were overflying. That's when it took Travis Walton. And I started to look at all these patterns. I'm going like, why in 75? And I made the association that we had the sightings there because North Dakota was a superpower. It had 300 Minuteman III nuclear missiles in these silos. And
actually the Northern Tier missile defense, like missile system, right?
Yeah. So, but they had 150 just south of us on the border. And we all knew the missiles were there. And that's when the guy that was they owned the airport pointed out to me, that's why they were here, the missiles. Because what happened was, it was the first anti-ballistic missile unit that went operational before Star Wars came in, that they were going to have one at Malmstrom, they're going to have one in Wyoming, I think, and they were going to have one in North Dakota. The only one that was built was in North Dakota at a place called, anyway, it's a small town just south of the border. And they built this Nixon's pyramid that had the radar that would pick up the Russian missiles coming over the North Pole and stuff like that. And they put in 150 new nuclear missiles in like a couple of months. And what it was they were going to try to intercept the Russians in outer space. So these 5 megaton launches that they would do and try to get the missile in outer space. And if those missed, then they were coming down, and then they would send these little sprint missiles with 1 megaton missiles on them. Because that's the whole idea. Most people don't realize that when Russia attacks, they're not going to attack Washington and Los Angeles and stuff. They're going to attack the missiles.
Take out the missiles.
You got to get the missiles first. Otherwise, you're not going to see what's going to happen. And so we always knew in Manitoba, where I lived, was we're gone. I mean, what the hell's going on? Because every 10th Russian missile is going to come short right on top of us. We're just on the other side of the border. So that I had that connection. And then I thought, why at the end of the year? Because that was the Vietnam War. As the Vietnam War ended, that's when all the sightings started where we were. But the thing was at the end of the year, and then what I thought what it was because the Americans didn't have any ground troops anymore in Southeast Asia. They pulled everything out of there and they had nothing. And then it was you remember, it was the domino theory. The domino theory, the communists were taking up one area or another. And it was, they had South Vietnam, North Korea.
Was
Laos,
that George
Cambodia.
Kennan who came up with the domino theory? I can't remember.
Was that?
Was it George Kennan who had the essential domino theory?
Yeah, I remember I took criminology at university, and it was a fascinating subject. It was like trying to figure out, it's like UFOs, trying to figure out what the Kremlin's doing, because it was all secret as to what they were doing. And so they were trying to figure out, are they going to take the Philippines next? Are they going to take Indonesia next and stuff like that? So it was this whole idea that because we don't have ground troops, we may have to use the nuclear weapons. And that was maybe why at the end of 1975, there was so many nuclear incursions with UFOs. But the other ones were 1973. That was 1967, if you take the Malmstrom one. Well, if you realize the Malmstrom thing happened just before the 6-Day War. And the 6-Day War, before that was the Israelis shot down 6 Syrian jets. And most people don't know, there's been a book written by these historians out of Israel now, that the whole 6-Day War was about one thing. It was about the Dimona nuclear power plant. The Russians, were assembling their first 2 nuclear missiles at the Dimona site. And the idea was that the Egyptians were going to invade Israel, and the Russians were in behind them, and the Russians were going to fly over. They flew the MiG-25 over the Dimona plant just before, and the whole thing was to take the Dimona plant out to stop them from getting nuclear missiles. And the whole thing, of course, backfired because they got all their planes got taken out on the ground and stuff like that. But that was the thing, that was exactly when they shut down the missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And then if you look at 1973, that was the Yom Kippur War. And again, it was nuclear missiles that they had lost a lot, and that the woman, whatever her name was, the prime minister of Israel, had loaded 10 planes or 9 planes with nuclear missiles, and that they were going to drop these bombs.
Golda Meir?
Golda Meir. And that was exactly 1973 when that war was going on. There's 2 things happened. That was the Pascagoula abduction, which happened just outside of the
Which
Pascagoula.
Is right next. Yeah, nuclear submarine, like they made the tax.
Where they do the nuclear submarine stuff, yeah. And then the other thing that happened was Colhart tells the story about the thing over top of the base in Australia, where this UFO was over the base. That was on the last day of the war, was when that thing was over the base, and that base was in communication with the American submarines in the Indian Ocean who had the nuclear weapons. So every time you look at sort of these events and you go, oh, that's why we had these UFO things. You always, there's some sort of military hotspot with nuclear weapons going on in the background, and you start seeing this and you start realizing like, oh, now it's starting to make sense.
What about nuclear accidents, right? So there's 3. I've heard anecdotally about Fukushima and kind of at least orbs associated with it. I've heard about Chernobyl with UFOs associated with that. I haven't heard a lot about it. I've never heard anything like that about 3 Mile Island. Have you heard any?
Not 3 Mile Island. There's a couple of good stories about Fukushima. In fact, Chris, he just died. The cattle mutilation guy, Chris, the guy that has the biggest collection of cattle mutilation stuff is out of New Mexico. And he came up with this Gaia theory, that the cattle mutilations may not even been done by aliens, maybe a Gaia thing where the Earth is sort of fighting back or whatever. And he's the guy who came up with the idea about the nuclear, everything is downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities. And he mentioned a place in Minnesota where they were refining uranium or something. And he said, if this is true, then there's going to be cattle mutilations. And there was cattle mutilations within a couple of weeks. So when Fukushima happened, he talked to this other cattle mutilation guy.
Or wasn't it the other way around? There were cattle mutilations, and then they found out that there was some radiation leak in Minnesota right beforehand?
That happened in Manitoba. I know the Manitoba, there was a leak in Manitoba where there was a cattle mutilation. We couldn't figure out, because it was downwind from the Nevada test site, but it was farther over to the east. But we had that when there was cattle mutilation, and then I went back in the papers and stuff and found, there had been a leak at it wasn't a big plant, but there was a leak there. But
it could also be whatever this is. It's their way of monitoring the biological damage, the radiological damage downstream of these things.
Yeah, but you wouldn't need to leave the cow. Like the big question is, if you got the cow, why do you go back into the war zone and drop the cow up from 100 feet down into the farmer's yard? that horrifies everybody. That's what they're trying to do, is horrify.
It could be both. It could be both.
Yeah.
Right.
But the Fukushima thing, when the Fukushima thing happened, the two top catalytic accumulation guys, the guy who came up with the theory of the nuclear thing, they said, oh, if this is true, then we should start getting accumulations in Oregon. Because there not been any accumulations in California and Oregon, because they were on the other side of the mountains. It was all on the plain states like Montana, Wyoming, all that stuff downwind.
And this is because of the jet stream. The jet stream carries the radiation over.
Yeah, and so they said if there would be accumulations, sure enough, there was accumulation started right after Fukushima. I think it was 7 days or 10 days after or whatever. And this is this thing that has sort of backed up the fact that there's these reactions. It's not random stuff. People always want to believe. We believe, because of Darwinian theory, we believe in this random thing. Everything's random, and it's like. And the more I look at the world, the more I go like, nah, this is like it's like a play playing out. That it's almost like pattern, and the pattern is the thing that's important. So yeah, the nuclear thing is definitely something they're worried about, and the environmental thing, because that was the thing that this girl that just died. Man, I'm bad with names today. Was at the Ariel School. That was the message they got. And this is where you come into the thing with the experiencers, where you start seeing patterns. And her and her friend were on the logs on the outside, and they're running along the logs, and they're sort of bouncing up and down. She said, you see this flash. And suddenly she looked beside her, and this gray alien is beside her, and he's sort of bouncing up and down the same as them. And then she's like, what is going on? And all of a sudden, boom, they're right in front, and the stuff's coming out of the alien's eyes. And they start using, and this is something that really impressed me. They started using it's called rapid image cycling. So these images are coming like 100 a second. And she's getting all these technological images in her head. And then the last one's a flash. And she said, that doesn't mean that the world is going to end. And the other girl beside her is getting the environmental images, ecology images. And so they get that. And then what I find out is the healing thing. So you get healing is connected to all this. The Bankston healing method. So Bankston invents this healing method, which is supposedly is the Cadillac for curing cancer. And he did the mice experiments, and all the mice were cured, all this kind of stuff. And he came up with this rapid image cycling, where you take ego images, which appeal to the left brain, and you flip these ego images at 1,000 a second or whatever. They teach you how to flip these images really fast in your head. And then you can cure people of cancer. The heat comes out of your left hand, which would be your right brain. And he had this thing, and then I'm thinking, that's the same thing. That's rapid image cycling. And I'm starting to look like, where did he get the idea? Because it's not like you sit down, Sean, and you got nothing to do today, and you think, well, maybe I'll just learn to flip 1,000 images in my head, and I'll learn to cure cancer. Well, they got that. Somebody gave that to them. And sure enough, in his book, it's called The Energy Cure. I read in his book, and at the very end, he learned it from a guy who was a psychic who could heal people. His name was Bennett Merrick. And he said, Merrick went off the deep end when he was finally near death. He thought he was an alien. He thought he was from Alpha Centauri. And he said that I was an alien too. And then we'd come to the Earth to bring this healing method. And I go, hey, it's the same thing. It's the alien. It's the alien using its rapid image cycling. And then I sit down, and then Susie Hansen just blows me away. She says, it was 2011. And a bunch of us experiencers get taken to it looked like a classroom or like an auditorium down below an underground or something. And there's 200 or 250 of us in there. And suddenly there's an environmental image on the screen. And then there's another one. Then there's another one. And suddenly there was like 100 or more a second coming, and they had taught us how to do it. And I went, shit, it's the same thing. And so you see this pattern. There's no way people are going to make up 3 different stories about this rapid image cycling. And this is a unique thing. That's where you learn through experiencers that these people are onto stuff. When you start listening to their stories, you start picking up stuff like, can you see in 360 degrees? Can you make a craft bigger on the inside than outside? Is time and space existing? Or when I asked Chris Bledsoe, I think about the engine. Because Lukatsky, one of the things he said, we found out there was no engine, there was no fuel tank. So what are we really dealing with? He said. And so I went to Chris, because I knew that a lot of the people had said there was no engine. So I went to Chris and I said, hey, Chris, when you were in that orb and they're flying you around all over the world there, that 4 hours, he said, it was 4 months. And then he said, Grant, I've never seen an engine. And this is the whole idea, is like the thing's alive. It's all conscious. And we're sort of missing these patterns of people telling you stuff that, even the idea of AI, that these 36 or 50 people telling you that this craft has this conscious. So the idea is AI, if you want AI, you can't use like switches, off and on switches. You've got to use biological material. And when I talked to Steve Mera, who you interviewed, I talked to Steve Mera, and he said, oh yeah, we were working on bio boards back when I was in the business. And this is the whole idea. If you want artificial intelligence, you've got to use biology, and you can teach the biology to do whatever you want to do. And that's so when you see an experience, you're talking about the craft and what the craft can do. You're looking at artificial intelligence in the next 5,000 years. And the onus is on us to listen to the people, but we're ignoring them because we're so obsessed with the technology and the potential benefits. And then you get all the scientists like the Invisible College, all these scientists sitting in the background, and they're all waiting to do patents because, this is going to be worth lots of money. I told the story of Tim Taylor, the one patent that he had, the company that was part of I know how much the patent was part of the company, but he got this from the beings. He sold the company for $100 million on NASDAQ. And I don't know how much the invention was of the company. Maybe it was just a small part. But you can imagine there's going to be a lot of money in this thing, especially the biological material. So that's what you do, like in psychedelics. So everybody now, because psychedelics is a hot subject, everybody's trying to patent every single thing that has one molecule off of psilocybin, and they're trying to find all these new things so they can patent it, because you can't patent psilocybin because it's a natural product. And this is the whole thing. So it comes down to these patents that it's all, bottom line is money. It's always money.
What do you think that the phenomenon wants people to do? I mean, it seems to me like it's in the process more of shaming our elites for kind of keeping things secret and recklessly driving us into near nuclear war with Russia. But
yeah,
could be wrong.
As I said, like when Jim Semivan was asked who's running the show, he said they are. That's what they're doing. They're upping the ante. It may be the final, this idea of 2027. They're just going to keep wrapping it up and wrapping it up and wrapping it, and they're not going to land. Because the landing is a left brain issue. That's what we do. We go into Iraq and say, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's. And that's not what they're doing. They're trying to force us to figure it out. So I think they're just going to ratchet up more and more sightings and more dramatic sightings and just bizarre stuff that CNN's going to pick up and Fox, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until it's undeniable, and you're going to get the admissions and the telepathy things going at exactly the same time, where we're starting to realize that there is this non-local part to the universe and stuff like that. I think we're at a point, but I don't think we have anything to do with it. We're just sort of observers of them pushing this issue.
Mm-hmm. Any advice for the audience on kind of how to handle this strangeness, craziness?
Well, the way I looked at it, my experience was when I first saw it, because I was raised very religious and I was supposed to be a minister and stuff like that. And I sort of saw it as, there are miracles, but in the Bible, there's no miracles now. Nothing happens now. You don't hear it. And when I saw it, that was my first thing. It was like, oh, there are miracles. It was like I was just so floored by what I saw. And so people got to realize that, especially people who have had experiences. I always say to the first thing I say, have you written this down? No, I haven't written it. I said, you should write it down for your kids. Because 500 years from now, you're going to be famous. I mean, everybody's going to be famous. And it's like, we got to live at the time when this was happening, when we discovered this. It's going to be like living at the time of the signing of the Constitution or the signing when we were around with Jesus. Oh, these people are so lucky. We got to realize we were lucky to be in this game, to see this thing unfolding, and then realize the bigger picture of the message that they're giving, this oneness message, is the idea that you got to remember who you actually are, that you're not actually a human being, that you're this etheric being that comes and plays in a puppet. And you play the puppet for so many years, and then you go back and then you play a different puppet and stuff like that. And the idea that we may have come in, because you hear whether it's these non-autistic kids who are telepathic. And I confirmed this with Diane Hennessy Paul. I said, do they say we're here to help you? And she said, yeah, we hear that all the time. And that's the idea. Don't feel sorry for us. We don't want to be cured. We're here to help you. And so it's this idea of the three waves in ufology, that these people are coming in. So there is a possibility that you and I agreed before we came in that you're going to do pod shows and I'm going to talk like a mile a minute, and we're going to do this kind of stuff, and we're going to raise the consciousness. And if that's true, if there is this idea that there's reincarnation, then you and I probably came in for a reason. So the whole bottom line of the whole thing is you came into the world, you're going to leave. And when you leave, according to what I understand, they're only asking one question: how did it work out? Because you planned it, you put the characters in there. You can't blame Hillary Clinton, the dog ate the homework, my mother-in-law. You can't, none of that kind of stuff. You're in charge of this thing. And people say, oh, I forgot, I could have done better, stuff like that. So we came in for a reason. We're going to be asked how we made out when we leave. And all we got to do is figure out why are we here and are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? And whatever other people are doing is totally irrelevant. We didn't come in for them. We came in for our mission. And we only going to answer. We can't bring up the other people when we leave the world. And to realize one of the things I got when I did the 27 psilocybin things and then wrote the book on it was they showed me two things 4 or 5 times. One was compassion meditation. I didn't even know a thing existed like this, where I got to feel the people dying and the people around the people who are dying, the dread and, oh, it's over, and one after another, and all this pain. I felt all these people's pain. And then it was a different issue of all the pain, people's pain and stuff like that. And the other one they gave me was the gratitude thing, which was so funny because I'd be in these psilocybin sessions and I'd be going, man, I wonder if the gratitude guy's coming, because it would be like almost like someone took a pail of honey or something and poured it over your head, and it would just go like this, and it would come down, and you'd be so grateful. It was like I'm the luckiest person in the world, and it would just unbelievable gratitude for everything in the world. And then sometimes it wouldn't happen. I'd be going, I wonder if that gratitude guy's coming again. And there was the whole thing is to have gratitude for the fact that we're even alive, the idea that there is even something, that the idea, why is there not something instead of nothing, that we're all a part of this, and that we may be eternal, and that we got this absolutely, especially you and I, we get to be in the middle of this thing that is so rabbit hole dragging that you can't, people around you don't even want to talk to you because you're so obsessed with this thing. And it's just so interesting. And you look around at the people that are watching TV or doing whatever, and you're going, how can you do that? It's like, it's just so boring to sit there and try to, what are we going to do tonight? Let's find something on TV, flip, try and find something to watch and stuff like that. It's an amazing story, and the display is there. And I feel lucky because I always say, I mean, I could have been born an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and live in a junkyard and spend my day in a junkyard looking for something valuable enough to find for food for tomorrow. I didn't get to do that. I got to play in the biggest Super Bowl game of all times. This is the biggest, I think you'll agree, this is the biggest story that will ever come down the pike. And you and I got to play the game. And it's like, you got to be totally grateful for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you again, Grant. It's an absolute pleasure.
We'll do it again.
We definitely will do it.
When they have the bigger incursions, we'll talk. And just the one thing on the orb thing, because Ron Pandolfi said there are no drones. So of course we posted a picture of Ron Pandolfi holding a drone because he's the drone expert, and the idea that these things are drones and stuff like that. I mean, Langley, they tried to shoot him down. You don't move a fighter wing without trying to take these things down before you move the fighter wing. There's something very seriously going on, and I think especially the U.S. military is realizing we have no control over this, and that's what Jim Semivan said. He said, people think, well, they got this all figured out and they're shooting down aliens and stuff like that. And Jim Semivan said, I'll bet you a year of my salary, my retirement salary, that they haven't got a clue. They got bodies in Harvard. They haven't got a clue what's going on. That's what we've got to sort of realize, that the phenomena is running the show. And it knows what it's doing. And that's what this book I got coming out is called Beyond Managing Magic, Landing the Plane. And that's what it told me. Don't worry about it. We know how to land the plane. It's like,
all right, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
As always. Talk soon.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.